Okay, well, I don't want to delay anybody. We probably have meetings and work to get back to come 2 o'clock. We did say 45 minutes for this webinar. There is a chance we might go a few minutes over, but we'll see how we go. Firstly, my name is Jane. I am the recruitment manager here in Trinity Executive Education. And yeah, I'm very pleased to have you all on this call today. Today, we're going to be talking about sustainability and why it still matters for businesses. So on this call, we have Professor Max Schormar, and Max is the program director of our postgraduate certificate in sustainable development for business. He's also assistant professor in business ethics here in TBS. He's an expert in business ethics and sustainability strategy. And we'll hear today why, cutting through the noise and why sustainability still matters for business. Max couldn't be here in person due to a conflicting appointment that he couldn't reschedule. So he's very kindly recorded his session. So I'm going to start with that, and then I will hand over to Brian Minahan. Brian, I'll introduce you just at the top of the call here. He's the principal of the Sustainable Business Group with over 35 years of experience across IT, consulting, and sustainability, including leadership roles at Novartis, Ergo, and many global firms. He now advises organizations on ESG strategy, greenhouse gas reporting, and building real business value through sustainability. I'm hoping we might have a couple of graduates on the call, and people who have done the postgraduate certificate in sustainable development for business, and we'll go towards the end of the call and chat to them about their experience of the course, providing that they have access to the call by then. All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to share my screen now and share Max's recording. Bear with me.
To speak to you a bit about my take and, in a sense, our take at the business school.
Can I just check that everybody can hear that? I think that's...
Yep, can hear it, Jane.
Yep. Perfect.
On cutting through the noise around sustainability that has come up over the past months in particular, and how to understand the importance of sustainability for business. So I think, first of all, we need to take a step back, just looking at the past 5 years and what kind of remarkable incidents have happened in relation to sustainability. So 2020, obviously, we had the pandemic. In 2022, we had the war in Ukraine. And last year, we had the election and the re-election of Donald Trump. And these three events obviously have huge geopolitical and economic implications. And they hit the sustainability agenda in Europe in particular, which was really accelerating in the 20 years from 2020 onwards. And so certainly these events had an important impact on the discussion because they obviously framed the perspective from political regulators and the wider public. So the noise that I see out there is on one hand connected to what is called the omnibus proposals in Europe. So around the upcoming regulatory frameworks that the EU has already introduced, European Sustainability Reporting Standards, CSRD, or is about to introduce and coming into force over the coming years, the Due Diligence Directive. And obviously this has created a lot of discussions. Is the EU backtracking? Is sustainability not important anymore? Because now they are talking about changing these landmark regulations. So that's one part. And the other part is the ESG backlash that we are seeing, particularly in the US, where it seems like the drill baby drill agenda is taking hold, and ESG issues like diversity and inclusion are kind of erased from websites. And it seems like there is a lot of backlash also in the investment community. And in particular, in the investment community, we have seen certainly a deacceleration of funding over the past years as the ESG momentum has slowed. So it seems like it's not a great time for sustainability if you look at the convergence of these trends, culminating really this year in the EU taking a moment of reflection on the current regulatory frameworks. However, I see this largely as noise because the fundamentals around sustainability have not changed. And for us at the business school, certainly our strategy is focused at the core on sustainability, and at Trinity Executive Education as well. We have adopted this strategy years ago when the kind of sun was still shining brightly in the sustainability land, if you like. And we're certainly not disregarding this now because we know it's the right thing to do for business. And it's an inevitable step for any business to engage with. And so, first of all, this insight is really driven by the fact that we see successful businesses adopting sustainability, changing their business models, and meeting the challenges that we are facing. And those are certainly not changing. So if you look at the biodiversity situation, the climate situation, it's clearly not improving, and it will not improve if we do not continue to act, even if the mood at the moment is a little bit different than it was 2 or 3 years ago. So that's certainly the challenges, the underlying challenges remain. And the value, the strategic value of sustainability for any business remains as well. If you want a future fit, resilient business, you can't escape sustainability because at the heart of any business sits a supply chain which is always connected to environmental and social impacts. And so proper due diligence on these issues is important, and your own risk assessments are important for your own long-term business planning and strategy. And at the same time, it's also the case that society is certainly moving forward. We have many businesses, for example, we have record renewable deployment across the world. So a lot of success stories happening as an undercurrent in the current overall discussion that focuses a bit more on the factors that seem to put a brake on sustainability. It's an inevitable strategic value for any business to engage in, and it has huge benefits. Some of these tools that are talked about, like materiality assessment, are very, very useful for any business, even if you do not have to do it from a regulatory perspective. So I think it's important to stay focused on the issue in this particular moment in time. And that is the long-term strategic value of adopting sustainability in a business. And that has not changed at all. And so we need to stay focused on it. Many companies stay focused on it. And that's the long-term recipe for success. And we know this from research that is well consolidated by now, that there is certainly no financial argument against embracing sustainability. Businesses are doing better financially if they engage in sustainability because it improves their strategy and overall supply chain management practices. It makes them more resilient and makes them future fit to encounter an increasingly uncertain world. So let me maybe bring up a slide just to hammer home that point that I'm using to illustrate why sustainability is actually important for business. And you will quickly realize that many of these elements here on the slide have not changed. And one of them, stakeholder expectations. It's clearly the case that sustainability is an important factor for consumers, for investors, and for the competition overall. And civil society certainly will continue to focus on these issues. And I think part of the reason why we had a big increase in interest in sustainability was that some of the downsides of business as usual have become more tangible. Extreme weather events have become more tangible. We understand the climate mechanisms better. Poor working conditions in supply chains have become more publicly known across the world. And so people are more aware of it. That's only going to intensify because obviously natural sciences and natural ecosystems operate in a certain way, and we know enough that we definitely cannot step on the brake in acting on those issues. Apologies. Then obviously regulation has been an important driver. There's no way around it. The acceleration over the past years in businesses looking at sustainability has also been driven by the EU regulatory frameworks. And these will be revised, but they will not be erased. And so the core frameworks will remain in place with more generous timelines, and also some simplifications. That's actually a process that is currently ongoing at the EU level. And we can expect first insights on how this will look like become firmer towards the end of this year. Currently, we already have proposals on this from EFRAG, the body here in the summer. They have issued their first draft. Now until September is the comment period, and then they will provide a report to the EU by end of November. And on that basis, then political discussions will be happening. So this year, I think it will already become clearer what specifically the EU is up to. And then the other important driver is rankings, ESG ratings, which have proliferated over the past few years, and which clearly also indicate that there are benefits for companies in the marketplace to be recognized as a leader in sustainability. And obviously the big topic of reporting, many reporting frameworks out there, chief among them, the EFRAG associated ESRS, European Sustainability Reporting Standards, that are currently being revised at the EU level. And sustainability there has many drivers behind it. And so it's important to not conclude from the current kind of apparent mood shift around sustainability that we are seeing that the topic is not important or that it's not coming on the agenda again. We had certainly an ESG hype over the past years, particularly in the finance world. But as usual, you know, these things tune down. And at the moment, in my view, it's a bit too negative, the conversation, and it will normalize. So I see it also as kind of a normalization of this issue. It's important. Businesses need to focus on it, and they need to do the hard work around it and not talk, but act in the end. So I think that's the key message. Don't mistake the noise for the signal. The signal is clear. Sustainability is and remains a core priority for any business that wants to exist in the future. And every business model is threatened by environmental and social crises. And you can only handle those by reformulating your business model and engaging with sustainability. And then it's less about fancy reporting than actually about looking at your supply chain, looking at your stakeholders and your negative impacts, and then innovating to improve on kind of a journey of constant improvement. That's ultimately what it's about. So with that, I'm now happy to hand back to Jane.
Okay. So that was great. Great to hear from Max just regarding, how practically sustainability, the fundamentals of sustainability and why it's still so practical and needed for business. So I appreciate that. Max has also kindly provided a recording of an overview of the Sustainable Development for Business course that he leads out on. If we have time, I will play that a little later on. And if not, I will ensure that it goes directly to all those that registered to attend this webinar today. So now I'd like to hand over to Brian, and we're delighted to have you, Brian. I'm going to share the slides here with you for you now, and you just let me know how you want to go through them. Bear with me a second. I need to, sorry, 2 seconds.
No problem. Hi, everybody. I think Max has summed up the uncertainty that we're all seeing at the moment, and it can appear as a bit of a mixed message across the industry. But actually what we're seeing in our business is that from SMEs right up to multinationals, people are still driving ahead, because the wicked problem, and I'll talk about that in a second, the wicked problem of sustainability and especially climate change is not going away. Thanks, Jane.
Okay.
I can see those now.
Perfect.
So if you pop on to the next slide, I love this quote on the first slide from Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the United Nations, and it talked about a wicked problem. It doesn't respect borders when we talk about climate change, but supply chain is as critical. So it doesn't matter whether you're rich, poor, small, or big, it's a global challenge, a wicked global challenge. And therefore, sustainability, including climate change, is something that we all need to focus on and show solidarity on. Go on to the next one, please, Jane. A question we get regularly is, yeah, it's a wicked problem, but does sustainability have a return on investment? And the answer is yes. Now, most companies will focus on their financial return on investment, whether you measure revenue, profit, EBITDA, whatever your financial reporting, everybody tends to look at that. And more, we're seeing the risk side of it, but there's a number of other returns on investment that we'll talk about now. So if you pop onto the next one, please, Jane. This surprises people. So, depending on where you are on your sustainability journey today, you might be reporting under one of the major European schemes or specific schemes like CDP and science-based targets. But EFRAG, Max mentioned, key one for us in Europe. But also, if you're operating in Europe, if you're based elsewhere and operating in Europe, then depending on your size, structure, revenue, number of employees, you may have to report in Europe as well. But there's a number of return on investments beyond the financial one, which I talked about, the risk one, and Max mentioned impacts, risks, and opportunities. We'll talk about those in a minute. There's also the social side. So what's the impact your company has on community and community has on your company? That's a double materiality. Likewise, talent. Just go back to the previous one, please, Jen. Yeah, that one, thanks. We talk about talent. So hiring now, there's evidence, and I'll show you some evidence from Mason Alexander and CareerWise that show that employees, potential employees, are asking, what is the position on the company before I join you? And there's some interesting stats on that. Big one, and again, Max talked about it, is what I call a participation and demand ROIs. So if you're a company that submits tenders, especially to government or to private sector, large multinational, there are points being awarded in tenders for ESG policy strategy action plans, but also companies in the multinational that have SMEs and smaller organizations supplying to them. They're demanding ESG metrics so that they can report themselves. So it's not just about finance, not just about risk. There's several other factors as well. And the big one that we're hearing is legitimacy. So companies want to be seen as legitimate in the market, and more sustainability, having policy, strategies, positions, and tracking their sustainability position is seen as making them legitimate. So let's go on, Jane, and talk a bit more about each of these in a little more detail. Before that, let me talk about what and when perspective. So everybody, I think, looks at leaders and laggards in industry. So this is a time perspective, and regulation, as Max said, will become more vociferous. We saw a little bit of a step back from the CSRD and CSDDD as part of Omnibus, but actually VSME is now in place. The voluntary SME standard is in place and accepted by the European Union. It should be ratified and adopted later this year. But if you look at laggards and leaders, where you're a leader, people have already identified that high risks, impacts, and opportunities. Laggards have no perceived risk, but that may exist either in the supply chain or within their own organizations. Prime example might be logistics firms that have high transport, airline industry, where business travel or employee commute exist. Then there are risks and potential impacts, but if you haven't identified them and don't report them even internally, not necessarily to the market, then you may be seen as a laggard. As we move across the graph in time and your perspective might change, then dealing with future risks now is critical because it will become more expensive in time to deal with those same risks. And also, if those risks are exacerbated, then it becomes more expensive over time. Okay. So there's a time perspective on this as well. You may not need to report today. You may voluntarily report, but the benefit we see in business is that they're actually getting better attention, better participation in tenders, better results on the bottom line, and profitability. So if you carry on to the next one, please, Jane. This is a confusing slide, and in the left hand side you'll see people looking, where do I report and when? So this is looking back at 30 years into how the sustainability regulation and reporting developed. So way back it was just the ISO standards, whether it's 14,064 or environmental management systems 14,001. But if you look at back in the early 2020s, there was a huge amount of focus on this, and I think people got jaded. So Max made the point that Omnibus came about not only from the geopolitical situation, but from the EU taking a good hard look and getting feedback from industry. And Omnibus was designed to simplify this. So you'll see some of the reporting for multinationals has been pushed out to 2027, 28 if you weren't already reporting. SMEs are subject to the voluntary depending on size, but really now we're refocusing, if you like, and reassessing who should report, when and where, and very much depends on your size, your structure, your revenue, or your employee base. So I won't spend time on this one because it is a complex slide, but let's go on to the next one, please, Jane. So this is a breakdown now. ROI financially is pretty easy to measure. if you have operational efficiencies, for example, renewable energies, simplification of supply chains, transport and logistics, you can focus on things that actually reduce the cost of engaging in your operations. And that's the obvious one for most companies. Risk ROI, big one at the moment, is the cross-border adjustment mechanism for tax for goods coming in from outside the EU. But energy security, raw material availability, and supply chains, as Max mentioned as well, are big challenges. But if you look at the social side, then there's key things like the social benefit beyond your own company and operations. There's the community side. Your customers may buy your products, and if they're demanding an ESG position or better sustainability in your products, then you may have to actually align to their thinking. Otherwise, they won't buy. Biodiversity, big impact in Ireland. I think we're the lowest forested country in Ireland, and we need to improve that, and the government is taking steps. Talent attraction is the key one. You need staff and key skills and capabilities to drive your business. If you can't attract the talent, or if they're attracted elsewhere by somebody having a better sustainability position, then you're going to suffer. And as I mentioned before, tender participation, whether it's public sector government or whether it's private sector that demand you have a position in a policy and give you points in tenders for that, then that's the push and pull of your customers, but also suppliers may be asking you for those positions. Everything to me also aligns to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and you can see I've aligned some of them, whether it's partnership for the goals, whether it's affordable and clean energy, whether it's no poverty. That all depends on your company's perspective, what you value in terms of your return on investment and how you deal with your customers and suppliers. I'll give you some examples. If we pop onto the next one now, please, Jane. This is a lovely one. So if you're in the Dublin region or County Wicklow, Poppies and Enniskerry, a lovely SME case of where they actually looked at, with the Sustainable Energy of Ireland, looked at their energy, identified that they could use both heat pumps and solar and thermal. And their very simple measure was it increased their bottom line, their profitability, by reducing the cost of energy. And they actually put a number on that one. So where you're an SME and you're focused on ESG, you may not need to report because of size, but if you look at the sustainability, especially around renewable energy, is a very good example locally for us in Dublin region and Wicklow, where Poppies actually made a saving on their bottom line. And that's a quote from Peter Norton. He noticed profitability, the financial return and ROI, as his key driver for pursuing grant aid and pursuing renewables. Pop onto the next one, please, Jen. Now, the global picture and risk is a very interesting one. So if we look at the cost of climate change now and the impact on stock markets, it's an alarming 1.14 trillion. You'll see the sources I've used for these, by the way, the World Meteorological Organization, Boston Consulting Group, the Irish Central Bank. So where globalized operations have a susceptibility to climate impact could be supply chain across food, where we're sourcing elsewhere, putting aside war in Ukraine at the moment, where wheat, grain, and other simples are sourced from. Even in Ireland, we're seeing a big risk. So in Ireland, published by the University of Maynooth and by the central bank, flood risk at the moment inland is costing 101 million. And that doesn't account for severe losses, which every 25 years can be much more, almost 5 times that amount. Interesting studies showed that for every 1 degree of global warming and climate, there's an 8.2% increase in intensity, which is why we're seeing such heavy floods, rain, and even the size of raindrops the university identified were an impact. If we look at the bottom of the slide, then adaptation and resilience is critical, and Boston Consulting Group have identified that this is growing as a market. So the ability to be able to identify your risks, understand the impacts on your business, whether it's upstream supply chain or downstream customers, and then implement adaptation and resilience is a growing business. And depending on the complexity of your supply chain, you'll see at the bottom, you could be looking at your tier ones, which is asked for under CSRD, but you might be looking at tier 2, tier 3, depending on how complex your supply chain is. And obviously, if there's issues like social issues, maybe human trafficking, child labor, or sourcing of products from non-reputable supply chains, then you must look at your supply chain risk and then adapt to how you're going to deal with it within your business to avoid risk. If you pop on to the next one, please, Jane. This one is an interesting one and fascinates me every time I look at it and have a discussion with a company. So Mason Alexander did a survey. They've got quite a broad reach in the recruiting market. They surveyed respondents to open job positions. and asked them, how do you see sustainability? And 21% said it's important, very important. 45 said somewhat important, but 34 said not important at all. So there's still a body of recruitees who don't see it as important, but the vast majority, 66% in this case, saw it as important. So 2/3 of those being hired see it as important. Now, if you're spending an average of 7.5 to 14,500 per recruitment, then that cost mounts up if you're having to continually recruit because you don't have a position and employees or potential employees are not attracted by company as a result of that. They dug a little bit deeper though, very interesting, and they started asking deeper questions. And when they got to the bottom core of it, then 54% of potential employees said that sustainable business practices, sourcing, partnering, carbon neutrality are important to them. And social impact. So the more they look at it, social impact is big, your CSR activities and your environmental advocacy. Only 13% said green office initiatives, such as the internal single-use plastics, disposable cups, that sort of green initiatives they didn't see as important, but it's the bigger issues that they're looking at. Next one, if you would mind, please, Jane. This one is a big one now, and I respond to tenders, or we respond to tenders ourselves. And more we're seeing 15 and even 20% of the points in a tender being allocated to policy and strategy on ESG. If you don't have it, then you won't get the points, and possibility is, unless you've got a very niche or monopoly position, you're not going to win a tender. And of course, the government has got its green procurement policy. I've cited the circulars there that you can refer to yourselves. But the Irish government has green procurement. You'll notice it in their tenders. And the bottom line is that if you're not in on an ESG policy, it doesn't have to necessarily be an environmental management system, but policy, strategy, and action plan, then you'll get points for that in tenders. And obviously, business success should follow, all other things being equal. Stakeholder demand is a big one. So we deal with a lot of SMEs as well as multinationals, UK and Ireland. And we're seeing that the SMEs are being asked more and more for ESG metrics and KPIs because their customers, which might be multinationals or large corporates, which have to report, are being asked for it themselves in their supply chains. And if you don't have it even as an SME, and some of them are micro SMEs and niche, small to medium SMEs, they're being asked for this sort of information. There's a perception that it takes a lot to actually report. The answer is it doesn't. You can actually have a position on policy, strategy, action plan very quickly, but also then driving it into your customers, downstream customers, and fulfilling their needs and reporting is very important. And I think, Jane, that covers it for me. So the bottom line, as Max said, is that sustainability matters aren't going away. There is a bit of a hiatus or a perceived hiatus in the market, but in reality, people are still quietly reporting because their customers or their partners are demanding it.
Thank you so much, Brian. That was hugely informative. Some really fantastic statistics there that hammered the points home. And yeah, as you say, it's really still about identifying risks and adapting and yeah, being able to be resilient amongst the continuing changes we're seeing all around us in the environment. So thank you so much. I'm going to just check if we can have a hands up. If just bear with me a second. I do see you have two questions here. Do we have any of our past graduates? If you could raise your hand if you're there, John. John, thank you. John, I might ask you to come. Let me see if I can make sure. If your audio or your video is working, bear with me a second. We're just going to try to turn on your video there, John.
Video's right.
John Lyons.
Yeah, sorry.
And in the meantime, we have two questions in the chat here, and I might put them to you if you don't mind. In the meantime, Brian, we have two questions. The first one being, what role does sustainability contribute to the long-term resilience of a business? I suppose you've covered that really, and it may this question may have come in just before you kind of ran through the presentation. This same person asks, what role does sustainability play in risk management and long-term profitability? So kind of a similar question there. Maybe
I see those.
Cover on that again.
No problem with answering it. Isaac, thanks for the questions. First of all, good questions. Let's talk about supply chains. And I talked about the weather events and the impact, the 1.14 trillion impacts that we're seeing already, and that's getting worse. So every year we're seeing a growing impact of climate related issues impacting business. If, for example, I'll give one example, but there's many. If energy is a key factor in your business, take data centers. Then if energy sourcing is a key factor and you struggle to find a supply, that becomes a risk in your supply chain. You may have to look at alternates. And I know in the US, they're looking at alternates at the moment, even nuclear, portable nuclear. But if energy is a risk and you can't source it profitably, or you can't hedge to be able to buy energy at the right price, then that's a profitability issue for you. So looking ahead, looking at the renewables potential, looking at the markets that you invest in, looking at the location of your facilities will be critical. Let's talk about supply chain as an example. And we all talk about palm oil and deforestation, biodiversity impacts. So if your products contain a lot of palm oil, and people start reducing or increasing, then we have biodiversity impacts. If your ecosystem services, for example, like water, like air, like raw materials, like clean materials, if you can't source them, then it increases your risk in your supply chain. And it means that you may need to look elsewhere. That's a cost factor to you. It'll cost you more to source, but also it has an impact on quality and potential sourcing. Global supply chains, we saw big disruption with the Suez Canal recently as well, or in recent years. Even that sort of impact, the geopolitical impacts can have a big impact as well. So it's looking across those impacts, risks, and opportunities, figuring out how they impact you, the double materiality, and then putting in a strategy to actually mitigate against them. And hopefully that answers for you.
Thank you, Brian. I was busy trying to ensure that Anne Keogh, one of our Sustainable Development for Business graduates, and John Lyons were able to unmute themselves, which I hope you can now. I've made you panelists. Thank you so much, John. A familiar face to me. You spent 9 months with us in here, and yeah, thank you so much. You're part of our alumni community, and I know we've been in touch since you finished the course a year ago. I might ask you first to just give us a little overview of, what brought you to the course, and I suppose what were some of the key learnings you took away with you from the postgrad.
Hi, Jane. Good to join, and it was good to hear Max's recording and be reminded of I suppose, maybe just to give people some background on my background and my motivation for doing the course. So my role, I work in the IT world. I'm the practice director for analytics and business performance management with ProStrategy. So we would help implement analytic reporting solutions for our clients. We do quite a lot of work with customers on financial reporting. So I suppose at the time, there was quite a lot of talk about CSRD and the demands that it was going to put on a much larger number of people. So that realistically was an opportunity for our business. We needed to understand what it was, and we needed to be in a position to, I suppose, advise our clients. So I was starting to explore this, attended one of the ESG conferences and met yourself there. You were at Trinity at a stand, and I kind of thought, well, it'd be the kind of ideal means for me to learn about ESG in the broadest context would be to do the course rather than trying to do independent research. So that was my motivation. I suppose I had a very specific desire to understand the demands of CSRD reporting. However, I also knew that I needed to understand the broader, I suppose, holistic reason for it. And the course was fantastic. I was just reminding myself of the modules. The one of the first modules we did was the Sustainable Green Organization, and going through that with Sam kind of really helped me understand the extent of what is required by organizations if they really want to embrace sustainable strategy, and how it touched on kind of all aspects of the business. then as we kind of worked our way through the course, the level of lecturers and the guest lecturers that came in from, I suppose, who were working in companies and practicing and at a real practical level. And we had people in from, I'm trying to think, like CIE, Inroad Aran, some of the large pharmaceuticals, some tech companies, and some of their large consulting houses, and their insights into, I suppose, putting these policies in place and driving them was really educational. So and then being in a class with peers that came from so many different sectors, and hearing, I suppose, learning significantly from my fellow classmates as well as from the lecturers was great. So it was demanding,
Yes.
but it was very rewarding.
Thank you, John. Really, really nice to hear from you on that. And yes, it is. Of course, a lot of people who opt to do this postgrad do ask me, is it doable alongside a full-time job? And I know it's challenging and there's assignments, but I would like to say, yeah, for the most part, pretty much nearly every applicant, not all, but every participant on the course so far has been kind of a mid to senior manager, working full-time with a lot of responsibility. Doable, but certainly challenging, and across a 9-month period. Yeah.
My golf suffered.
Hopefully you're getting your swing back now. Thanks, John. Thanks so much. And just with time flying on, I might come to you. And you were the year before John, actually. So you were in our second cohort, and I know, John, you're in our third, and we're about to go into our fifth. So maybe you tell us a little bit of what brought you to the course, and maybe some key takeaways. And maybe I might also ask you, would you recommend the course, and if so, why? Something along those lines, Anne, in your own words, if you have
Sure.
a few minutes.
I'm going to start with your last question.
Okay.
I absolutely do it. For anybody who is on this and thinking about doing the course, absolutely do it. The program isn't just about learning the theory of sustainability. It also is about understanding how to apply it strategically to real business. And I found that there were loads of things in it that just helped me on a day-to-day basis at that senior level. I'm an accountant. We need all the help we can get to bring sustainability into the business. And I really felt it was so important. So don't think twice about it, just do it. And I do love the question. I was laughing there when you said about the balance between work and the course. There's no point pretending that it's not an additional something added on. And it brought a lot of, we talk about balancing life, but there was a lot of imbalance at times, but that's all okay, because that trains us as well. So you get that understanding of how to mix it, but it just was really good. So I think your first question was really what brought me to the course. And I suppose sustainability had been mentioned for an awful long time. And I just felt that as an accountant, I needed to know a little bit more about it. I didn't come from a very strong academic background, so the whole thing of going into a classroom really was quite challenging, and that would have been some of the things that held me back. But I just decided in the end that it was essential for my long-term success, my own success. And I wanted to deepen my understanding beyond that surface level of the concepts, and I wanted to learn how to integrate the sustainability into the strategic approach that I have to work. And I'm on board levels, I'm at the senior level, so I always felt quite exposed that I really didn't have that understanding, and most importantly, how to implement it all. And when I looked around at what to do, because I didn't really know what to do, but when I found the Trinity course, I just felt it was a no-brainer. And it stood out from a very strong academic foundation. I loved the fact that the real world business applications were being brought in, and Brian was one of our lecturers, and he was absolutely superb. And I just felt that there was a huge interest in the people giving the course. Max was just the passion he has. He just brings you along, particularly on those days when you're feeling challenged and you've rushed in from a long day. You know, you sit in front of Max and you just get pulled along, and it all of a sudden doesn't find that it is a big, complicated thing that we're doing. And it delivered everything for me that I really had hoped for, you know. And the final bit is working with my peers in the classroom. I just didn't realize that they'd all become both people who'd helped me during my work and also become great friends. We
Yeah.
spent a lot of time drinking in the path.
Well, that's it. You do get a student card, and you know, you wouldn't be a student in Trinity without going to the PAV. So it's important. That part of it is important as well.
Yeah. So I hope I kind of covered everything you asked there, Jane.
Yes,
but,
and I did. I threw lots of questions at you, but really it's just getting that student voice is really important, because, you know, I can talk about the course, but I haven't done the course. Now I'm quite familiar with the content in terms of, you know, working alongside Max and learning from him. But yeah, I mean, hearing the student voice is really important for
Yeah.
anybody considering it, because it is an undertaking. It's 9 months in total. Now, this class is only across 8 of those months, and it's 1.5 days per month, but it is in person here with us in the business school. And it is a commitment. So of course that needs to be considered before anybody applies. Thank you so much, Anne. Really appreciate you giving your time and your feedback, your perspective to us, and John as well. We're coming close. It's 1:44, and I think we don't have any more questions. They've been answered, the 3 that we were given. So thank you for your questions. What I would say is that if you do have any questions, do send them to me directly. If I can't answer them, then certainly I can put them to one of my colleagues here, or one of the panel, and get back to you. But you'll find me at jane.flanagan@tcd.ie. I'd also just like to briefly say that the course is closing for application on the 11th of September. So that closing date is looming, and there's a few documents required for the application. So if you are thinking about it, or you just want to find out more, get in touch. We can schedule a quick call, or, you know, chat via email, whatever suits. But now is the time to seriously get thinking about it, and get the application in if it's something that you're interested in pursuing this next year. I think hearing from everyone on our panel shows us why it's still really important to invest in sustainability, essentially especially for the environment, but for business, for profitability, to kind of you know, to have your ducks in a row for what's coming down the line, but also to be able to be at the forefront of it. I really enjoyed all of the presentations and the chats today, and we'll leave it there. I'm going to follow up with a short video which is an overview of the course from the man who created it, Max Schormayer. I'll send that to all our registrants, as we didn't have time to go through it. It's just short, 8 minutes, I believe. And then maybe if you watch that, you might have questions to come back to me with. Guys, thank you for your time and your attention. Thank you for making it to the session. You have 15 minutes to eat your lunch, and I'll let you go, and hopefully hear from you all again soon. All the best. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Shane. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.